Welcome, everyone. This is the Hopenning. This is a place where hope is happening. My friend Marina and I have created a space that is safe, inspiring, and more than anything else, guaranteed to bring you hope. My name is Fran. I am a 34-year veteran elementary school teacher. By the time this is aired, I will have been a former elementary school teacher because my passion is rapid transformational therapy, and I am an RTT practitioner part-time. My friend Marina is a full-time clinical hypnotherapy therapist, full-time clinical therapist specializing in rapid transformational therapy. And together we have created the Hopenning. And so I live in Northern Alberta, Canada. My beautiful co-host lives in Southern Alberta and in the city of Calgary. And we welcome you if this is your first time, or if you've been with us many times, you are all welcome. Marina, it is our pleasure and joy today to bring a very special guest to our show. Would you please do the honor of welcoming him?
Thank you, Fran, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am honored today to introduce you to our friend, Brad Chandler. Brad is also an RTT. Are you a therapist or practitioner? Therapist. And he is coming to us from Virginia. Brad, during his efforts to help his son overcome his extreme anxiety, Brad found out that he had unresolved trauma from his childhood. That unresolved trauma caused his subconscious mind to rule his life by a set of untruths, mainly that he wasn't worthy, causing a lack of self-love and self-compassion. Those untruths dominated his life, costing him 2 marriages, $9 million in business mistakes, use of alcohol and marijuana to escape amongst many other negative things. Through a transformative exercise and ongoing meditation and neural reprogramming, he was able to find self-love and self-compassion, and he no longer allowed these untruths to affect his life. He was literally and figuratively born again. He found true freedom. He has now created a proven process that will allow you to do the same. If you are ready for change and are willing to look at things from a different perspective, please reach out to Brad at bradchandler.com. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. So tell us more about your journey. This is fascinating. Where did you come from to now be to what you are doing full-time? This was a little bit of a snapshot into that. So tell us more.
Yeah, so I read a book in 9th grade on how to buy real estate with no money down. And now looking back, I know why that intrigued me. When my parents got divorced, we almost lost our house and had to move into public housing. And so I wanted to make a bunch of money. And it turned out I wanted to make a bunch of money because I didn't feel worthy. But I didn't know that until I was 47 years old. So at 47 years old, when I was trying to get my son help for his anxiety, I was speaking with a performance coach, and she said, "You blink profusely when you talk about your childhood. You probably have some unresolved childhood trauma that's affecting your life and your son's life. Do you want to come out and work with my husband and I?" And I said, sure. And I flew out to Park City, and literally over the course of a weekend, Marina, actually in 3 hours, a 3-hour session, my life was completely transformed. I came out of that Airbnb bedroom feeling like this tremendous weight had just been lifted off of my chest. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm free. I'm free to be myself finally. And that was 2.5 years ago. And man, I got to tell you, the ride and the journey just keeps getting better. It's a never ending journey, but it just keeps getting better each day.
That's amazing.
You know, Brad, as you spoke, it's 2.5 years. So in 2.5 years, you went from 0 to 100, like 0 to 100 miles an hour. So, that's the thing with Marina and I, and probably you as well. When we know it works, we know it works. And it's like, I got to know more about this. I've got to jump into this with 2 feet, because there's no point just putting your toe in the water and touching it. because when you know it works, you know it works. So at 2.5 years ago, Brad, what did you do at that point to get you from there to now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna kind of maybe delve into what you said about the 0 to 100. I like that analogy. So if you're looking at life and 0 happens to be complete brokenness, and 100 miles an hour is just like you're a Ferrari, high performance, you can't be any better. I feel like in the first literally days or weeks or even hours, I went from like 0 to 75 miles an hour. And I think, or maybe even 80 miles an hour, because my life transformed that radically. And now I think for the rest of my life, I'm at 80 miles an hour right now, and I'm going to try to get to 100 miles an hour. But guess what? Driving between 80 miles an hour and 100 miles an hour is so freaking great. It's like amazing. So what did I do? It was not RTT, but it was very similar to RTT. We went back to my childhood and we looked at the times where I felt like I lacked control or I had some type of childhood stress and trauma. And we figured out the stories, because that's the real trauma. What happens to you is the traumatic event. The real trauma is the stories that you tell yourself. We figured out what those stories were, and then I told myself the truth and listened to a recording over and over again and just reprogrammed my brain. And that's pretty much it. And then I started working with clients, and I've taken so many courses on this stuff. Like, I just can't get enough of this stuff. I just love it so much, because I got a text today saying, you're changing my life. And I put it out across social media. I go, I've never been more fulfilled in my life. This was better than any 100 or 200 or 300,000 real estate deal I ever did, when someone says, you're changing my life and my family's life.
Yeah.
So I feel lately I've been asking this question quite a bit. So somebody asked me, and I'm going to ask you this. After you have healed your life, why was that not enough? Why did you decide that you need to help other people?
So I came back from that weekend in Park City, and I took a couple of deep breaths, and I looked around at the world and my friends and my family members, and it was so clear. I felt like in that 3-hour session, I found the secret of life. And I looked around at all of these people who have terrible marriages and are severely overweight and come home and drink 3 or 5 glasses of wine and have OCD and depression, anxiety. And I looked at all of them, and I'm like, guys, there's something that can profoundly change your life. And it doesn't take 30 years or 20 years of talk therapy. I just did it in 3 freaking hours. I went to therapy personally for 30 years, 3 decades on and off the therapy. I went to 50 different marriage counseling sessions with two different wives. I got 100x more out of that 3-hour session than I did of the hundreds of sessions I went through. So the answer to your question is, how could I not? Someone just said, hey, I'm going to give you a lottery ticket. And by the way, you can give this lottery ticket to other people. You
will win.
You can benefit from the lottery ticket yourself, but you can give the winning numbers to as many people as want the winning numbers. And that's why I was like, I've got to do this. And I know after 47 years, God put me on this earth to do this work.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. I reread in the last week, Zero Limits again. And in the foreword, Joe Vitale says it so brilliantly, where you go from victimhood to the creator of your new life to being in service. And I think I speak for all 3 of us that that's exactly what happens. So,
well, Marina, let me touch on that.
Yeah.
I was one of those people. I never was the victim. I was the person in an invisible prison. This guy, and I wish I remember his name. I just saw the quote. In order to escape from prison, what do you must know? You must know you're in prison. I didn't know I was in prison.
No.
I thought that my life was great. My second wife, in the middle of COVID, literally a month into COVID, woke up and said, I'm done with you. 6 days later, she pulled the moving truck up. She cleared out half of my house. She left. I thought that was the worst thing in the world. And then I went on this dating spree, and I bought a boat, and I took my boat to Florida. If you'd have asked me, did I love myself and was I happy? I was like, yeah, everything's great. But once I went through the work and I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was masking everything. I had a mask on the whole time, living a lie, trying to be someone who I wasn't, because I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin.
That's absolutely profound, Brad. And when I look at your story, there is the money issues as well, that losing all that money. So tell us the lessons from that.
Well, so money was a big part of my trauma, I think, when I look back at it. My mom, till this day, is she's afraid of losing money. She's very cautious. So it was always like, and she still tells me today, be careful, don't spend too much money. My dad got his worth through money. My dad showed his love to me through money. He didn't hug me. He didn't say he loved me as a child. He didn't take me to the doctors. He bought me stuff. So I already had that really messed up dichotomy. And oh, by the way, all of the fighting occurred, and there was a lot of fighting in my childhood. Most of it seemed to be around money. So I had that trauma. And then we have the trauma of my mom saying, to no fault of her own, we may lose this house. Your dad isn't giving us any money when he left. We may have to move into public housing. And oh my gosh, public housing, I'd been there and it was scary to me as a child. So I was thinking, I need to make a lot of money, because that's how you show love, and that's how you find safety, and that's how you find security and worthiness. So I, in my business, in my real estate business, took these crazy risks and did these silly things, thinking if I can, never consciously thinking, unconsciously thinking, if you can make millions, you're going to be worthy. And so I made these crazy mistakes, only five, that cost me $9 million. And they were all, looking back, trying to prove my worthiness, or flex my ego or whatever.
So how do you feel about money today?
So I've come a long, long, long way. I'm not perfect. Like I do well, but I still catch myself saying, I booked this hotel last weekend, and it's for this exclusive mastermind that I got invited to. And when they told me the nightly rate, like, I took a big swallow, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can you discount that? And he's like, no. And then I'm like, I just took me a second, and I'm like, I can afford it, and I'm going to get so much out of this. And I did it. So while I'm not perfect, the awareness, all change begins with awareness. Now that I'm aware of it, I can easily deal with it, and it doesn't cripple me. I don't need to now. When I started this coaching business, Brad Chandler Coaching, it's the first business since I started at seventh grade selling blow pops, that I didn't start a business thinking, how much money can I make? If you have heard my previous podcast, I turned 50 last month. I'm going to live to 110. That's what I'm manifesting. I'm a health and longevity nut. I'm going to serve at least 1 million people. That is my goal. And I know that if I keep focusing on the impact and not the money is going to actually come more than ever before, which is going to allow me to make a greater impact.
Wonderful. Again, in service.
Yes. And that's what it's really about. When we find our passion, it just collects more, right? It collects more of the positivity. It collects more of the goodness. Goodness attracts and collects goodness. Is it a law of nature? I don't know, but it's certainly the law of positivity for sure. So you've got an incredible story. You tell us a little bit about what happened with your son. I think that's a big part of your whole transformation, right?
Yeah. So when you do this work, all your relationships get better, right? So I've been a single dad now for 12 years, and my son is 20 years old now. He's got a job. He's working in an industry he really loves. And I don't get a lot of time with him, because he's either with his friends during the summertime, or 20-year-olds, they like to sleep till noon, and his job is late in the afternoon. So I don't see him a lot, but I got to spend some quality time with him last night watching the US Open golf tournament. And he's like, Dad, my anxiety is like all but gone. He's like, I'm not perfect, and he's still got some vices, but he's like, it's so incredible how far I've come in these last 2 years. He has family members, cousins that have anxiety. And he's like, I tell them that my anxiety is free. And he's like, they don't even say anything. He's like, it's amazing. Like they're not even asking me like how I did it. And I was like, yeah, they're just not ready. They're not ready. They're stuck in their familiar ways, and they're right where they need to be at this time. So he's doing just like all of us. None of us are perfect, but he has made leaps and bounds. It's been such a great, and our relationship has become a lot closer. He actually told me in that weekend in Park City that he believed I only loved him if he played golf very well. And he was a really great golfer. Of course, I never told him that, But I think there was a part of my subconscious mind that said, if my son can make the PGA Tour, I will be worthy. And my subconscious probably did put pressure on him. So
interesting. So, Brad, if people go on your website, bradchandler.com, there are absolutely great content on there. And I can, like, even just the introduction video is fantastic. But I know that you have this amazing self-love quiz on there. Can you tell us about that?
yeah. So when you made the comment about the victim, and I said I didn't know I was a victim. Like if we would have been on this podcast, if I would have been listening to this podcast 3 years ago, and you guys started talking about self-love, I would have tuned out. I would have been like, oh, that's woo-woo stuff, and I love myself. I've got this boat. I've got all these women. I'm drinking. I'm partying. Like, what's not to love, right? Well, it wasn't the case. I didn't love myself, and that lack of self-love is the number one cause of every bad thing in this world, from the war in Ukraine to our prisons being full, to hospitals being full, to the divorce rate, obesity rate, drug addiction, anxiety, depression. I could go on and on and on. It's lack of self-love. So if I thought I loved myself, I thought to myself, how many other people will hear my message or your message and say, well, I love myself, so I can tune out. So I created this literally 3-minute, 12-question self-love quiz that if you go through and you answer candidly, it will tell you, do you have extreme self-love? Do you have mild self-love? Or do you lack self-love? If you have extreme self-love, I would bet you your life is amazing. Your relationships are probably great. Your business or your job are probably great. Your health is probably good. If you have mild self-love or lack of self-love, I bet you that there are areas of your life that you're struggling, somewhere from severe to medium. I don't know. But here's the thing. If you score in one of those two, lack of or mild self-love, don't take that as, oh, woe is me. Just the opposite. Take it as, oh my gosh, this means my life can change profoundly. And if you work with someone like us on this podcast, it doesn't have to take years and years. Over a couple of sessions, over a couple hours, your life can change radically. So yeah, if you want to take the quiz, just go to my website, bradchandler.com, and take the quiz. It only takes a couple of minutes.
And you say it, we say it. I mean, I did the couch therapy as well. I mean, I did it for 5 years religiously because that's the way I am. And yeah, definitely it did help. It definitely helped, but it wasn't rapid. It was chipping away at the old stone heart. It took a long, long time. Until I felt like, okay, I think I'm going to be okay, just okay. And on our scale of 0 to 100 is probably like 50, right? I'm going to be okay. But the rapidness really came with awareness of why. The awareness of, why did I go in this direction? What was it inside of me already that pushed me in that direction? Because, the way I look at it, I needed to be healed. And the only way I could get the lesson was to go through it to become healed. Because right from the time we're little, we're programmed to believe something about ourselves, whether it's generational or whether it's something that happened to us as small children. Rapid transformational therapy really is rapid. It'll pull that Band-Aid off, and we'll be able to take a look at it and start to heal that wounded child inside. And so all of us, all three of us, know the power of it. And for yourself, you used, was it neuro-linguistic programming that you found helpful for yourself, the immediate programming?
So it was a combination of probably that and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and lots of meditation.
I want to come back to self-love, because to me that's one of the biggest themes of my life. And I've said this before in an episode. I think that's one of the biggest things that's wrong with the world. Exactly what you say, the war in Ukraine, everything else. And I think growing up in the traditional Christian faith was that love your neighbor as you love yourself. But please, can you tell us how to love ourselves? Because I think that's the one missing piece. How would you know how to love your neighbor if you don't know how to love yourself?
Yeah. You've got to reverse the deeply seated thoughts that are buried inside of you, right? Fran said awareness, awareness, awareness. When my ex-wife would come to me and say, hey, this just bothered me, I would turn it on her. So the fight, And then I'd flight by like being cold to her for 3 days. And I didn't like it. And I got this like weird feeling in my chest. I had no idea why I was doing it. Now looking back, it was my subconscious mind saying, see, I'm right. She's proving it. You're no good. So I had to fight. So how do you love yourself? You figure out that those stories you told yourself as a young child, that you're not good enough, you don't belong, something's wrong with you, whatever it is, that those are all just untruths. Like you are enough, you always were enough, and you always will be enough. It just happens to be that someone didn't meet your childhood needs, or they made you feel a certain way, and it's not your fault. So that's how you begin to love yourself, when you can turn around these untruths that are deeply seated within you. And if you're like, well, do I have these? Just look at your results. Are you triggered often every day? Do you take things personally? Are you do you come home and drink a lot? Do you have self-destructive behaviors? Do you always have to be right? Like, just ask someone who's close to you. Do you do those things? And some of those questions are in the self-love quiz. And if the answer is no, you have issues with those, then you got to figure out how to do the opposite by turning around those terrible thoughts in your subconscious.
Like you said, turning it onto your wife. It's like Zoom, that we don't even realize that we're doing it until somebody else points it out, and then we're all taken aback. Like, how can you say that about me? When I do all of this, I'm providing for you, and I'm giving you the money, and I'm doing all these other things that make me an honorable husband, an honorable parent. But it's like the road we take, right? We're not ready to exit until the exit is presented to us and we actually see the exit. And so this journey of ours, everybody's on a different journey. Everybody takes a different amount of time to get to the exit, where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to feel this way anymore. And it's not going to be about the amount of alcohol we take, or the amount of sugar-laden foods, or the amount of pot we smoke, or anything else. It's going to be the working down deep inside and figuring out what is going on inside, not about outside, inside, the triggers we talk about.
Yeah,
So you are on a trajectory now, and you were making, well, you're talking in the millions here. You lost in the millions, so you're on a trajectory now. And you say 1 million people by the time you're 110,
yeah.
right? So I think about astral projection and all of the rest of this. I mean, who could have believed that Marina and I would have met over the screen, and we would be doing a podcast now with you? I mean, it's all interesting. I think the future of healing and where it's going to go from here, it's something to really look forward to. I mean, I'm looking forward to it myself.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
So Brad, if you were to give us one last word of hope that we haven't talked about yet, what would be your last message of hope for our viewers, for our listeners today?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I just want to touch on Marina's self-love. The other thing how about self-love is, how do you talk to yourself? If you talk to yourself negative, you don't have self-love. Like it was probably literally now going on 6 months ago that I went to say idiot, and I stopped. Since that time, I have not said one thing negative about myself. So if you're talking negative to yourself, stop it. Be your own best friend. Talk to yourself like your own best friend. So Fran, your question, what can I leave listeners with? I think it's very, very simple. If you're suffering, you don't need to suffer. No matter what your suffering is, you don't need to suffer. You're suffering because you're not living in the truth. There's something buried in your unconscious mind that's telling a story about you that is so untrue. And all you have to do is reverse that programming in that story, and your life will forever change. You weren't put on this earth to suffer. You were put on this earth for a massive mission. And if you're like, well, I don't know my mission, how can you when the proverbial lion is chasing you? So for 47 years, the lion chased me. I had no idea. I made millions. I lost millions in my real estate business. That's not why God put me here. He didn't put me here to flip houses. As soon as I killed that proverbial lion by changing those untruths to truths, I looked around. I'm like, this is it. This is my calling. This is my purpose. And now I get up every single day and I can't get enough of this stuff. I am so fulfilled. I'm so passionate. I'm so happy. I'm so joyous like never before. You can have the same exact thing. You've got 3 people here who are living this life and have a proven formula. So if you're suffering, you don't need to suffer another day. Go live the joyous life that you deserve.
Beautiful. I'm actually going to ask 2 more questions before we
And
say
I've
goodbye.
actually got one more as well.
Okay. Brad, you don't just do RTT, you do RTT and coaching. So I really want to know more about your program.
Yeah, so it's a 5-week program. I did this is a great analogy is you've got to identify the monster. So you identify the monster in your room. You explain to the client, why does a monster exist? You then go and say, what is life going to be like without this monster in your room? You then teach them how to push the monster out. And finally, you teach them how to keep that door, the monster on the other side of that door forever. So in essence, that's what I do over 5 weeks. And in week 3, it is the hypnosis RTT, weeks 2 and 3, where we deep dive into those subconscious thoughts that your mind knows exactly the source of your problem. So we just tap into that beautiful mind of yours, go back and find that and reverse them through the neuroplasticity, or excuse me, through the neuroplasticity, of rewiring the brain and recoding it. So it's a full 5-week program. We do the self-love quiz throughout. So many of my clients have started with lack of or negative and ended with extreme self-love. I also have this brilliant way that I've cobbled together from different sources, a daily emotional tracker. So I teach people how to process their emotions, because at the end of the day, there's a book called Becoming Your Own Therapist on my desk over here. I don't want my clients to be coming back over and over. I want to teach them. So I basically teach them how to process their emotions, teach their kids how to do it. They can teach their kids how to do it. And that's part of the program as well. And then we go into, anyone that wants to at the end, a group coaching call. Because again, it's a lifelong journey. So check in once a week if you want to. If you don't, that's up to you as well.
Okay, Fran, you have a question and then I'll ask my last one.
Yeah, you talked about self-talk. And when I think of self-talk, I think of, why was I so stupid? Or why did I say that? Or, beating myself up about, something that I said usually or did. But there's something about self-talk as well in our body parts. I have a very good friend of mine who I just saw yesterday, and she was limping. And she's like, I don't know what's wrong with this stupid knee. This darn meniscus. I shouldn't be having this much pain in this stupid, and all this bad, this terrible inflammation, this bad inflammation that's going on here. And I listened, right? That's what I do. I listen, and I heard her speak to her knee that way, and I had to tell her, I had to say, your meniscus, your inflammation is there for a reason. It's there. It's helping you. Your body knows what to do. We just have to thank it. Thank it for what it's doing for you. If your inflammation is there to protect your knee so that you don't walk on it, that's what you need to do. I think that our culture of immediate pain relief disregards the knowledge of the body. Like, Brad, do you have any more suggestions or anything else that you can say on that with what you have experienced in your clients, or Marina as well, about the negative self-talk we do to our own body, not just to our psyche?
Yeah. So the only way you fix a mental or a physical problem is by going to the source of the pain, right? So there's a pain in her knee for a reason. First, she needs to go to the physical source of that. It could be mental as well. The body, just like you said it really well. That inflammation is like alarm going off that something wrong. When you have a fever, that's your body saying something's wrong. Well, mentally, it's the same exact way. When you feel any type of negative emotion inside yourself, it's your body telling you and your mind, you've got work to do. So instead of going and running and running for a joint or sex or a drink, you need to sit with that feeling. You need to identify it and not think that something outside it's going to fix it. So the same thing goes back to the way you talk about yourself. I mean, you know this because we've been trained this way, but whatever you're telling your mind or seeing the pictures, that's what your body's going to give you. So yeah, go to the source of the pain, both mentally and physically to that's because that's the only true way that we solve these pains.
I have a very interesting story about, how our minds play such an important role in the perception of pain. I've had back pain most of my adult life. It started in 1993. And because of that severe issues, I could not even give normal birth to my children, to have C-sections. And it's been always in my life. And I learned how to physically deal with that. I keep fit. And so I manage it. But if I do something, sometimes it would, like long flights and things like that, that may trigger that again. But I live a fantastic life. So recently, my husband and I bought a new bed. It was just time. And suddenly, I had tremendous upper back pain. Now, in my last MRI in 2015, they told me that there were some stuff all over my spine, not just in my lower back. But I'm like, no, I'm not subscribing to that. Thank you. But this time it was so bad, I couldn't move my neck. And I'm on my way. In 2 weeks from now, I will be flying to Denver to go to a Joe Dispenza retreat. And and this is just when I signed up, and I'm like, okay, let me go to the doctor to find out what I'm going to be healed from. So I got a diagnosis of some bad thing. And immediately I had so much pain. It was like 90% worse until I said, enough. It's manageable. I manage. I live life. I played 18 rounds of golf last night. Yes, it was a little bit painful afterwards, but I still do it. I function. So it was just the moment they gave me a diagnosis, I believed it. I was in such a bad state. I felt like a victim again. So I immediately had to just change that story in my mind. No, yes, I'm getting rid of it, but I'm not going to subscribe to the pain.
I'm in the middle of reading his book, You Are the Placebo, and it's just all about how your mind affects everything. Whether it's pain or illness or sickness or cancer, right. Like your mind is powerful.
It is indeed. So another question I have for you is about your podcast. Tell us about your podcast.
Oh, yes. I launched it a couple of weeks ago. It's called How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. And I've gotten some amazing feedback. I sent it to all my friends and we're just like, hey, just listen to a couple episodes and review it. And I've gotten some amazing feedback. And I bring on RTT folks. I know you're going to be a guest coming up. And we just talk about how to be happier. We carry on this conversation of how to live that joyous life and live your purpose. And I'm so excited. I've had some amazing guests on there. I'm going to continue to try to raise the bar and get high-level people on there. So yeah, if you want to check it out, How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs, it's on all the different platforms.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brad, for joining us today. It's a pleasure, especially since it is Father's Day, and just looking at your face, I can see joy all over it. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And if you guys want to connect with Brad, at least go to that self-love quiz, bradchandler.com, and his podcast, How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for being with us, Brad. It was wonderful and uplifting and just wonderful energy. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you like this, please subscribe, and we will see you next time with a big dose of hope.
Talk to you soon.